Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the Assembly Committee on Judiciary to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Here.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Krasner.
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Nguyen.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblyman Orent-Licker.
Here.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Chairman Yeager.
Here. I believe everyone is present. We do have a quorum. I want to wish good morning to the members and to those who may be watching, members of the public who may be watching either on the legislature's website or on the YouTube channel. Happy President's Day to everybody. For many, this is a holiday, but not for us here at the legislature. The citizens of Nevada have given us 120 consecutive calendar days to do the business of the state. So unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of having holidays off here at the legislature, but we did get an hour later start this morning. So hopefully that helped folks transition into Monday morning. Before we get started, I'll go over just a few quick housekeeping rules. Members of the committee and other members who are on the Zoom, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. That'll help with some of the feedback that we get. Next, we expect courtesy and respect in our interactions with one another. We might not always agree on policy, that's perfectly fine, but we need to make sure we're being respectful of one another and of the legislative process and institution. And then finally, often our members have multiple devices and screens in front of them to help navigate this virtual world. So please don't see it as a sign of disrespect. If you see members looking away, we're probably looking at a second monitor, an iPad, a phone to try to look at some of the exhibits and manage these meetings. So with that behind us, let's move on to the agenda. Members of the committee, members of the public, as you can see, we have two presentations on today's agenda. I am going to take them in reverse order of how they are listed on the agenda. So at this time, I'll open up the presentation on the Records, Communications, and Compliance Division of the Department of Public Safety. This really is a presentation that goes into more detail on some of the items we heard in the Department of Public Safety's presentation, which I believe was last week, or maybe it was the week before, I can't remember. But I want to welcome to the committee Mindy McKay, who is the Records Bureau Chief. And before she gets started, I want to let members of the committee and members of the public know that her presentation is available on Nellis to follow along or to save for any future needs. So Ms. McKay, welcome to the Assembly Judiciary Committee. It's good to have you here this morning, and please proceed with your presentation when you're ready.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Let me screen share. Okay, how is that coming through for you?
That looks great. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Alrighty, I'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the committee. I'm Mindy McKay, Division Administrator with the Department of Public Safety's Records, Communications, and Compliance Division. I have with me today some of my amazing team members, Lisa Galloway, she's our Chief Fiscal Officer, Erica Susie Yamas, the Records Bureau Chief, and Julia Ornelas, the NCGIS Modernization Program Administrator, to help answer any questions that I cannot. They have 40 years plus experience with DPS between the three of them. I have been with this division for 24 years, assigned to various programs throughout the years, working my way up to my current position. I am proud and honored to work for this great state and the Department of Public Safety and with all of its esteemed employees, and to be able to work with all of you and our many partners statewide and throughout the nation to meet our important missions. This will be my last legislative session for the record. It's a privilege to be invited back to the present to present this to this important committee. We are asked to provide an overview of the division, focusing on specific programs. We appreciate this opportunity very much. So on the next slide, I'm going to read to you our mission: to provide complete, timely, and accurate criminal justice information while balancing the need for public safety and the individual's rights to privacy. That will be important throughout my presentation. On the next slide, our division is made up of 200 full-time equivalent positions and 35 contracted staff. We have 6 locations throughout the state. We have 3 budget accounts and approximately 20 disparate programs. We are funded with general fund, cost allocation, court assessments, fees, and federal grants. This presentation will focus on more detailed information regarding the Records Bureau, Communications Bureau, and the NCJS Modernization Program. I will summarize quickly the other disparate services. The fiscal unit manages our accounts payable, accounts receivable, budget, contracts, building tasks, and they staff the reception desk at one of our locations. The Information Security and Compliance Unit ensures our department is compliant with the state security policies and laws, and ensures that the state is compliant with federal security policies and laws through training, audit, and site security checks, among other important tasks. For reference, I've provided a link to our website that contains a list of acronyms. Since we drown in them and seem to confuse everyone by using them often, I'll try not to do that today. And don't worry, there won't be a test. The Communications Bureau includes dispatch services for DPS and some allied agencies. They coordinate with local public safety agencies on critical incidents. They perform FBI CJIS systems agency tasks, and they perform warrant tasks for some of our other allied agencies. The other disparate positions include one position dedicated as the DPS administrator of the Spillman system used by DPS for dispatch and records management functions. A department IT liaison who assists DPS employees with various IT activities. A department terminal agency coordinator responsible for providing access, training, and auditing specific to NCJS, which I'll go over later in this presentation. And we have a few dedicated fiscal staff in this budget account as well. The Records Bureau has 14 disparate programs that it manages. There are multiple federal and state laws that govern the many programs in the division, which is a large list that I'm happy to provide upon request. As you can imagine, every legislative session has a large number of bills that impact the division. I'll review legislative impact shortly. I have some statistics on the next few slides that I would like to go over. On this slide, I will only touch on the civil fingerprint. So civil fingerprints received in 2019 was over 261,000. And in 2020, we received just over 221,000. Currently, our civil applicant accounts, we have over 2,000 accounts. And on the next slide, what I want to go over on this one specifically to call out for you is sex offender registry information. I know that there was a presentation recently done by the PNP chief, whereas he referenced that I might know a little bit more about sex offender information. So I wanted to provide this to you today. We have over 7,000 active registered sex offenders in the state, and over 22,000 that are inactive, but we have to keep them in case they come back in, and we are required by law to retain them as well. Within the active sex offender registry number, the number of tier 1s is over 1,500. For tier 2s, it's over 2,300. And for tier 3s, it's almost 3,500. Specifically to our Brady Point of Contact firearms program, we conducted in 2019 102,000 background checks for firearms transfers. In 2020, we performed over 185,000. That's an 80% plus increase. I want to point out that our firearms program is staffed 7 days a week, and most holidays they are working today, and they work 5 different shifts among them. In the staff, we've got 2 supervisors, both are new and being trained. We have 4 leads who conduct all of the research. And then we have 11 frontline positions to process initial background checks of which some are always vacant and some are always new hires. And so we are never fully staffed. And when we have new hires, we have tenured staff that are training them, so they're taken away from their program duties. And then I want to point out to you also on Safe Kits, the statistics on the sexual assault forensic evidence kit is from day forward from when we implemented the program, which is a new electronic program. And that date is June of 2019. So those stats are from June of 2019. So legislative session impacts. Every legislative session, we start out tracking approximately 400 plus bills. And at the end of the session, we end up with approximately 100 plus bills, give or take a few, that are enacted that impact the division on the topics provided to you on the slide. Being able to work with the sponsors, LCB Legal, and impacted entities is very helpful for many reasons, so I greatly appreciate our partnerships. If we can better understand the purpose of the legislation from the sponsor's point of view, then we can better advise on the best way to ensure it's implementable as it relates to our division programs being impacted. Regarding the budget side of session, we are grateful for what is in this biennium's governor's recommended budget, specifically the full appropriation for our system modernization. I want to take this opportunity to remind everyone that we will require additional general funds for the next few biennia to continue the modernization implementation effort, and then the maintenance and enhancements after it's implemented that is critical to officer and public safety. The division has two bills of their own this session, SB 19 for fingerprint submission state authority to support the current federal authority for those working with the vulnerable population. We also have SB 31 that makes various amendments to NRS 179A specific to, I'm going to lose my notes, sorry about that. Specific to, there's three different things we're doing with that. One of them is to change the definition of a record of criminal history to include city attorneys. So it includes all prosecutors. Another one is to remove the requirement for the division to annually publish a uniform crime reporting publication and post it on our website, because now we have a new system where you can go out to our new system and you can get your statistics when you want it and what you want. And then the last thing that we're doing with that bill is to, remind me?
We're
repealing some language. That's right. So our civil name check program, sorry about that, I lost my notes. To repeal some language in our civil name check statute, whereas currently it authorizes us to receive record or to provide records of conviction only. We are going to provide the entire record of criminal history, and then also statute does not allow anyone to share parole and probation information for any reason, and so we have to remove that language from the statute. The next slide. Next, I will discuss criminal history records. Arrest fingerprints are transmitted electronically, so we receive them expeditiously. The rest of the information we need for a complete criminal history record, such as prosecution and court data, is transmitted to us mostly manually on paper. We do have 2 courts in the Las Vegas area that provide electronic dispositions, but the electronic data only goes into the state record and not the FBI record. And it doesn't include sentencing information. So we receive that separately and then manually have to data enter it into both the state and FBI records. In order to receive this data electronically, we would need to establish an interface between our system and all of the disparate court systems, which is technologically challenging and costly to establish and maintain. It would be helpful if there were fewer systems used and the proper funding to maintain those systems and connections was available. We have successfully completed processing the 900,000 missing dispositions. Very proud of that. Very proud of my staff. We stay within about 3 weeks or less of data entering current dispositions despite the recent challenges. And Chair Yeager, you wanted to know about the ability to pull data to create reports. Data reports are table-driven. Therefore, reports can be created by data fields as long as we have the data field being requested. We can pull a certain type of misdemeanor by creating a list of Nevada offense codes or by the severity of the crime. However, we are unable to provide reports specific to drug offenses by the type of drug, as most of the crime statutes don't specify the drug type. You had mentioned if in the future there was a consideration to do an automatic sealing, and would we be able to run a report based on certain parameters to find those offenders? We currently don't have the capability to run a report for automatic sealing. For automatic sealing, the need for a final disposition would be crucial to efficiently run a report to ensure records are sealed properly. This report type would need to be run by specific Nevada offense code as well. We haven't designed the new system yet, so within CJIS modernization, we are replacing our criminal history system. We're not in the design phase yet for that. When we begin that effort, we will gather requirements that could include automatic sealing. We will have the ability to batch seal, which would be to seal a batch of records at once, up to a certain amount of records at one time from our side. If the amount is too large, then we would have to work with our IT vendor, which could take time and cost a little extra money. And CJIS modernization will provide more robust reporting capabilities. The new reporting tool will be user-friendly and make it easier to create and modify reports by users instead of requiring our IT to do that, which we currently depend on them to do that now. We are going to move on to NCGIS, our biggest acronym here at the division. It means our Nevada Criminal Justice Information System. NCGIS serves thousands of federal, state, and local criminal justice agencies in Nevada. It is the conduit for criminal justice agencies to access Nevada, FBI, other states' information, and international information related to criminal justice. It is managed by my division with the assistance of multiple IT vendors. Certain systems utilized are for civil purposes, such as for employment, licensing, volunteers, firearms background checks, sex offender registration, etc. Nevada files include fingerprint-based criminal history records, warrants, CCW permits, registered sex offenders, parole and probation, protection orders, Nevada offense codes, and DMV data. Files accessed directly in other states include the same files above, as well as Canadian files, Mexican commercial driver's licenses, corrections information, wildlife, etc. That system is through a system called NLETS, and they have 140 plus files that are accessible by other states. The FBI files that we have access to are listed there: gang, terrorist, foreign fugitive, a lot of similar files to the state, and the FBI currently offers 26 plus files that we have access to. NCGIS, the current system, interfaces and connects to a bunch of other systems previously mentioned on the last slide, FBI systems, Nevada DMV, NLETS that I talked about. We also interface with SCOPE, which is the Clark County system. Again, we have to interface with our own internal DPS, Parole and Probation Division, for parole and probation information. We have multiple foreign host connections to other systems, such as records management systems, computer-aided dispatch systems, and mobile computer terminals. And we also interface internally with some of our own division systems, to include currently our criminal history system, our protection orders system, sex offender registry system, and our Nevada offense code system. The very important NCGIS modernization program. Current system is 20 plus years old, so we're having to replace it. The proprietary owner of our current system is retiring soon. This is to meet our mission to provide accurate, timely, and complete criminal justice information for both criminal and civil purposes. It is a multi-biennial, multi-million-dollar implementation effort to replace multiple complex criminal and civil systems, and it's introducing a few new systems and functionality as well. It will require ongoing maintenance and future enhancements after implementation. It will improve functionality and customer service. It will be highly configurable for future changes. It will automate for timeliness and efficiency, and it will allow the division and the state to comply with multiple federal and state mandates. Timeliness and efficiency, for example, includes fingerprint-based background checks for civil purposes, which are currently mostly manual, that will become mostly automated with modernization. This means that the current time frame of anywhere between a 2-week to 2-month response time currently will drastically be reduced to mere days, allowing employers and licensing entities to conduct their business more expeditiously resulting in people gaining employment faster. I want to point you back to the February 4th presentation by the Cannabis Compliance Board to this wonderful committee, when Director Klimas mentioned his background investigation process, whereas he works closely with DPS. We do work closely with him and his agency and look forward to modernization, making his and everyone else's processes more automated and timelier. Additionally, there were overviews of boards, various boards throughout the state to the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor on February 8th, where the question was asked by an Assembly member regarding response times for fingerprint submissions. The answer from those boards was anywhere between 4 to 10 weeks to receive their fingerprint responses currently, which again, with NCGIS modernization, will be dramatically reduced to mere days. Continuing with the NCGIS modernization program, it is organized and with the program management office staffed with both contracted and full-time equivalent state positions dedicated solely and focused solely on NCGIS modernization. It is a program approach and not a project approach because this is a large program comprised of multiple projects. It is divided into multi-biennial funding to make it more affordable since the cost will be spread out. The risks of doing nothing. There's a high risk of failure with catastrophic consequences. Criminal justice agencies will have no means to search the system to obtain information for criminal investigations, intelligence, arrests, prosecution, sentencing, record seals, parole and probation activities, detention centers, etc. It supports tens of thousands of users statewide and nationwide and which will negatively impact public and officer safety. We will lose all ability to process any civil background check requests, which will affect public and officer safety as well. Such as the fingerprint-based background checks for our civil customers for employment, licensing, adoption, foster care, child care, CCW permits, volunteers, etc., as required by over 118 Nevada revised statutes, as well as other civil purposes such as record seals. Our Brady Point of Contact firearms program won't be able to conduct background checks for the transfer of firearms as required by state and federal law. Name-based background checks, our civil name check program that I referenced earlier, would not be able to provide that service as required by NRS 179A.103. And our sex offender registrations would not be able to occur and be placed into the state and FBI systems. There is no turning back. The new solution environment is vastly different than the current environment. Once we start, it's technologically impossible to roll back. Therefore, continued funding and support is essential to ensure public and officer safety, not only statewide, not only nationwide, but internationally as well. If anyone is interested in meeting with me and my staff to discuss any of our programs in more detail, please reach out to me. We can talk for hours about all of our programs because they are very complex. We are available to provide additional information also throughout the session to assist you with your arduous tasks and important decisions to help this session be successful. I want to commend legislative staff, legislators, and their respective staff for doing a wonderful job despite our current challenges. As well, I'd like to thank the other agencies in the state who have reached out to us regarding various legislation. Everyone has been very helpful, responsive, kind, understanding, patient, and cooperative. I want to take this opportunity to publicly commend my division staff, as well as the department staff, for their hard work and dedication throughout the years, but especially during this pandemic. Go team. That concludes my presentation. I appreciate your time today. It was great to see all of you, although virtually, and we do look forward to working with you throughout this session, especially with this being my last. And so we are here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Ms. McKay. Appreciate the presentation. I do have questions from several members, but I wanted to ask you a few while I had them on my mind. And of course, they're about the ability to run queries and provide data. And I just want to make sure I understood what you had said. So for instance, if I asked you if you could run me a report of everybody in the state convicted of petty larceny in the last 10 years, say, does the current system have the capability to do that? And I understand some of those you might not have a final disposition because maybe you're waiting for that information from some other justice partner, but for the ones where you do have a final adjudication or a final disposition, would the system allow a query like a time-limited query of a certain number of years under its current setup?
Mindy McKay, for the record, thank you for the question. Yes, our system dates back to 1986, so anything after that, and just we would need either the statute, and then we could tie it back to the Nevada Offense Code, make sure that we have the correct Nevada Offense Code for you, the correct time frame, and then, like you said, sir, as long as there is a disposition appended to that arrest, then we would be able to give you conviction information, but it would need to be there.
Great, thank you. And then I think I understood your comment about the drug offenses. To the problem there is you might be able to give me sort of general drug offenses, but typically when we're talking about low-level drug offenses, the information that you're provided from the criminal justice partners don't typically designate what the actual drug was. So you would have a hard time running, anyone convicted of possession of cocaine versus methamphetamine versus cannabis. Is that right under the current system? That information is typically just not there.
Mindy McKay, for the record. So staff, do you want to help me answer that one? I've got Erica Susie Yamas here with me, Records Bureau Chief.
Hi, Erica Susie Yamas. For the record, can you please repeat that question? I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm just, with the drug offenses, I think I just wanted to confirm that this is a limitation to the system and not a limitation that's your fault, but when you're getting dispositions or dispositions from district attorneys or courts for low-level drug offenses, they don't often specify what the actual drug was. So, for instance, if I were to say, I'd like a report of everyone convicted of low-level possession of cocaine or methamphetamine, that sometimes you just don't have that information in your system about what the actual drug was. It just goes down as a drug offense. And I wanted to confirm that was correct, or if it's not, maybe you could explain why you might have some of that data in some cases and not in others.
Thank you for that explanation. Erica Susie Yamas, for the record, you are correct. So it's the way statute's written. So I believe in statute for drug offenses, I believe it groups the drugs into, say, schedules 1 through 5, and it doesn't delineate the type of drug. So when the officers make that arrest, they're booking on anything that's included in a schedule 1 through 5, and that follows through the adjudication process. So when we get those arrests and we get the dispositions from the courts, that's all the information we get specific to those. There's few occasions where we in the past have had, say, misdemeanor possession of marijuana, but those are few and far between. A majority of them are the schedules 1 through 5.
Great, thank you for that answer. And then, the other line of questions I have, basically, Ms. McKay, you had mentioned that with the exception of a couple of, jurisdictions, you're getting information provided to you in paper, which is then manually entered into the system. My question was, with respect to the entities that you're interfacing with electronically, is that interface with them through the NCGIS system? And so I'm thinking of the slide you showed where NCGIS basically has all these different interfaces with different agencies and some internal. Is that the interface you have with those two particular agencies?
Mindy McKay, for the record, yes, they are interfaced with our computerized criminal history system and with our warrant system.
Great, and so
there's only 2 entities in Las Vegas that are hooked up to both.
Do you know off the top of your head which entities those are in Las Vegas?
Mindy McKay, for the record, Las Vegas Municipal Court and Las Vegas Justice Court.
Great. And so I guess my question, you had mentioned that, you could potentially have an electronic interface with other justice partners, but, there's some work that would have to be done there and there's some costs that would have to be done. But is that really the reason that you don't have an electronic interface with those other entities? Because I noticed from your slide, it looks like NCGIS does have interfaces with a lot of different entities. So, I mean, is that the reason, or are there other sort of technological shortcomings for the justice partners that wouldn't allow them to interface that way, even if they wanted to?
Mindy McKay, for the record, there are many reasons for there being a lack of interfaces. There are a ton of disparate systems throughout the state. Some of them are antiquated. They may not have the technological capability of interfacing with us or being able to at least maintain it once it is connected. There may not be an appetite for connection. We may not be able to connect because there aren't standard technical specifications, we call them tech specs, in order to ensure that the data they want to send us is data that we can capture. So it has to be data driven and it has to be standard data to go back and forth. And so there's many reasons, there's funding reasons, many reasons why.
Thank you. And then the last question I have before I'll hand it over to other members is, obviously, we've been talking about NCGIS modernization for a long time, and I certainly understand the need for it. We can't have an outdated system with no support. And, I'm delighted that the governor has continued to include that money in the budget. So when can you forecast? When are we going to be at a point where we have this new system modernization up, running with all the bells and whistles? Is that going to happen in the next couple of years? Is it going to be a decade out? Any sort of forecast you could give would be helpful.
Yeah, 2023 and 25 will be fully.
Thank you. Okay, I've got my program stuff. So Mindy McKay, for the record, toward the end of 23 through 2025, and again, like you said, as long as we receive continued adequate funding and support for that. And with any large technological program, because this is a program, not a project, you're always going to run into the unknowns and into some hiccups that might then further delay. But we have an amazing team, and we have a worldwide chosen IT vendor, Unisys. We've contracted with them, who they know what they're doing, and they do this all throughout the nation, specific to criminal justice. So this is not their first, we're not their first agency to do this with. Full competence in them.
Thank you, Ms. McKay. And I'm going to hand it over to some other committee members for questions. So far, I have Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, Assemblywoman Krasner, and then Assemblywoman Kasama, and then we'll take more questions, I'm sure, after that. So Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Chair Yeager, and thank you, Ms. McKay, for the very detailed presentation. And my question is about criminal records. One of the issues that has been a hot topic in my community is criminal records sealing. And I would like to get some feedback from you on how easy or difficult it is to seal records when you are receiving data from several different sources. One of the things that concerns me is for those people who have earned the right to have their records sealed, whether or not data is still out in the ether that can be found that will prohibit them from getting employment. So could you please talk to me about the link between your data, the federal data, the scope data, whoever else's data, and what happens when a person wants to have their records sealed, and how that is done in a complete and thorough manner? Thank you.
Mindy McKay, for the record, you are correct in that it is a very arduous, it's difficult for the subject of the record because it's arduous. It involves a lot of different agencies. There is a cost to it. It could be in multiple different areas. And the subject may not know who all has their record on file to seal. And so it takes a long time for someone to get their record sealed because of the process. They have to go through multiple different agencies to petition, get that petition granted, go to the court, get the records that they need to accompany their petition. And then in the end, because of the technological world we live in with the World Wide Web, ultimately, you might be able to Google the person and still find their record. Once we receive the petition to the order to seal, then it could be a matter of records retention. Did we receive the information from the agencies? So do we have it to seal it? And then if we do have the information and we can seal it, making sure that we've received all of the necessary data so that we're accurately sealing the correct charge or incident. And then we notify the subject once we've sealed it, and we send it up to the FBI for the FBI records to then be sealed as well. We notify the subject that we've done our part, but we can't guarantee all the other agencies have done their part or where the data may additionally be retained. We do know of a few agencies, like private entities, that might have it. So we let them know, hey, you might want to reach out to this company, this entity, and ask them to seal it. But we've had arguments that those companies don't have to seal in accordance with an order. So we can't control anyone outside of us. We do the best we can, but it is a very involved, arduous process. You're right.
Chair, if I may have a follow-up. You mentioned, thank you, sir. Ms. McKay, you mentioned that you provide background checks for civil, for jobs. Is that part of the E-Verify system? Do they come through you? Do you find that most of the large employers for the state of Nevada come through you? Do you have a contract with those folks? And I'm asking this because I know that I think we mislead people into believing that a record sealing is going to change their life. And now we're hearing the dirty details that maybe it won't. Because an employer may come to you, but then they may go to someone else, and then that person's record is not sealed. So who are the people that come to you the most as far as employers are concerned?
Mindy McKay for the record. So we conduct two different types of background checks for employment, volunteers, and other civil purposes. One is fingerprint based, and that has to have a statutory authority. And then if it's going to be submitted to the FBI, then the FBI has to approve that statutory language before they will accept those fingerprints for processing to get the FBI record. Earlier in the statistics for civil applicant, we have over 2,000 account holders in the state of Nevada for the fingerprint-based civil processes. We have over 113 different Nevada revised statutes that authorize those accounts to be accounts with us. And it's for multiple reasons. It could be in the medical field. Most of it's working with the vulnerable population. You're young, you're disabled, you're elderly. For employment and also for licensing, and also for volunteers in multiple different areas of employment throughout the state. We also have our civil name check program, which offers name-based background checks through our system. That came about in the late 90s, specifically back then for the casinos to have a background check option for their non-gaming employees, because their gaming employees have to have a gaming license, which is fingerprint-based. They didn't have anything for the non-gaming. So the civil name check was created back then specifically for that, but it has grown to other employment organizations, volunteer organizations, as well as third-party screening companies, background check companies that people might go through. But that's name-based, and we have about 20 plus accounts in that. And there were some statistics provided for you as well on those slides regarding our civil name check program, if you're interested in those stats.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. And, you know, the record sealing question is one that we've talked about a lot. You bring up a very good point, which is we can have our courts here order agencies within our state to seal the record. Central Repository can have communicate to the FBI to seal their record. But what do we do about websites that are not based in the state of Nevada that continue to carry that information? And the best I have is we really probably need a federal solution on record sealing to make that happen, because unfortunately our court's jurisdictions just don't reach beyond the borders of the state. So it's a problem we're going to continue to wrestle with in the electronic world we live in, but I'll stay hopeful that perhaps the federal government will come up with something where a state level sealing will actually work in the rest of the country. But, the way Congress moves, I won't hold my breath on that, but maybe at some point we'll see some movement. So I have a question next from Assemblywoman Krasner. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Yeager, and thank you, Ms. McKay, for your presentation. I have a couple of questions regarding juvenile justice records and sealing of juvenile justice records. So first of all, a juvenile justice record purportedly is supposed to be confidential, but I'm informed that there's a long list of people that can actually see that juvenile's record. Can you tell me all the people who can see a juvenile's confidential record, please?
Mindy McKay, for the record, we do not deal in juvenile records unless they were adjudicated as an adult.
So you don't have that information?
No, ma'am.
Do you know why juvenile records are sealed at age 21 and not 18? Because 18 is the age of majority when someone is called an adult in the eyes of the law. Do you know why they're sealed at age 21 and not 18?
Mindy McKay, for the record, again, because we don't deal with juvenile justice, I wouldn't know that information. I apologize.
Can you direct me to who I should ask for that information, please?
I can get you a contact. I'll do my best to send that to you. Do you want me to just send it to you or to the committee as a whole?
To the committee as a whole, and who is it?
I'm going to have to find that out, Mindy McKay, for the record. I'm going to have to find that out for you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Assemblywoman Krasner, I probably would recommend either connecting with Ross Armstrong over at DCFS or maybe Bridget Duffy at the Clark County District Attorney's Office. I think those two would be good people to start with. Certainly,
Okay.
if Kay has other folks she could recommend, that would be helpful too, but I think they would probably be able to answer some of those questions for you.
Okay. But Ms. McKay, I'll still look forward to your email. Thank you.
Let's go next to Assemblywoman Kasama, who I believe had a couple of questions.
Yes, Assemblywoman Kasama, thank you, Chair Yeager and Administrator McKay, for your good presentation. My first question has to do with the funding, which obviously you need. So with that increase in funding, you were talking about interfacing with the other agencies. Would it be correct that the other agencies have not upgraded their systems, that the interfaces still won't work, even with the upgrade to your system? Or how do you see all of that working?
Mindy McKay, for the record, that's a great question. It could be that if we're ready, they may not be, based on their technological advances or hindrances. So it just depends on how new their systems are and whether their systems have that capability. So it could be that we're ready and they're not.
Is there a concerted effort to bring all these agencies to a same type programming that will interface with each other so that each agency is not isolated, creating their own that doesn't have interface with the others?
Mindy McKay, for the record, that has been a topic of conversation for years, and the administration, the Advisory Commission on the Administration of Justice, the ACAJ, has a subcommittee on criminal justice information sharing, whereas we do have that discussion as an agenda topic pretty much every meeting to try to figure out how can we improve our criminal justice information sharing? What does that look like? How can we get there? Who's willing to do what? Who has the funding to do what? Are we able to do that across the board? So that is being talked about at various levels in various committees and has been for years. So we are still having that discussion.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that, because if we invest in these technologies, we need them. The goal would be for efficiency, which means they need to speak with each other. On your budget, so we've increased funding here for the modernization of your technologies. In your budget going forward, do those efficiencies increase savings in labor costs? So that would also be reflected as a decrease in labor costs with an increase in efficiencies in technology?
Mindy McKay, for the record, for my division specifically, yes, it would. It would see a drop in the need for humans to conduct manual labor because we are going to be automating most of that. We still will have some manual that's going to have to be processed by human beings, but we do foresee switching out their roles and refocusing them on other tasks because we will be automating.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's go next to Vice Chair Wynn for a question.
It's good to see you, Ms. McKay. Thank you for your presentation. And for the other committee members, I'm currently the chair of the ACAJ, so we do have this topic quite a bit. And Ms. McKay, we have talked a lot about having a consolidated like electronic system where all the justice system can communicate on one system, which seems like it's a no-brainer. But can you inform our members, like, I don't know if you know, but I know that I've been told that the potential cost to like implement such system, and if you could just let our members know about like what those costs would be.
Mindy McKay for the record. It's great to see you also. Thank you. Well, to give you an idea, my division, it's not the whole Department of Public Safety, it's just my division, and it's not all of my division systems. For our NCJIS modernization effort, it is going to cost approximately $58 million just to implement. And then there's going to be the ongoing costs of maintenance and future enhancements whenever something changes or whenever something new comes along down the pipeline, not only from the state, but from the FBI as well. We always have to be cognizant of that here at my division. So just to give you an idea, 58 million is just for, when did we start this effort? In 18-19 budget biennium, 18-19. We're in 2021, we're going into 22-23, and we foresee additional implementation funding through 24-25. And then that's just for implementation. And then, like I said, we're gonna have to maintain. So I would imagine that if you wanna do something similar for an entire state for 70 plus courts throughout the state, the effort that would take, not only budgetarily, but just the coordination between all of the agencies and all of their systems and the data migration. And it's a huge involved effort. But like you said, it would meet the mission that we've been on for quite some time to have an integrated justice system.
And then can you also kind of go into detail for our members the importance of how we've started down this road with modernization with that particular thing, and how it would be very detrimental if we were to stop funding that midway through, or and how that would look?
Mindy McKay for the record. Our current system, the proprietary owner is retiring soon. He told us about 5 years ago that he was retiring in 2 to 5 years. So technically he could call me right now and retire. It's his system. He takes it with him. We've got nothing. We would be in the dark. Everything would be shut off. We would lose everything for both criminal and civil. So this is a very critical effort that we must move forward for my division. If we stop in the middle of it, we cannot stop in the middle of our new modernization. We would lose everything that we've done, and then we would have to continue using what we're using now, which is antiquated. It's not easily configurable for any enhancements. It's difficult to maintain. And I don't know what we would do if he retired. So for us we just have to go forward. That's the bottom line, is we have to move forward. We've tried to think of every which way we can to see what this would look like in any other types of scenarios, like you mentioned. Would we be able to stop in the midstream? We've looked at everything and we just can't. We have to move forward.
Thank you. And I appreciate you putting those comments on the record. I think it's important for our members to kind of understand. I know that it seems like very common sense. It was to me, at least. I was like, well, everyone should be on the same page. If you're in one court, you should know what happened in another court. I know the judges would prefer a system like this. I know prosecutors would prefer a system like this. I know like our medical providers within like our prison and our jails and communicating between jurisdictions would greatly be influenced by this, but I do know that it is a huge undertaking that we will continue to tackle. And I would encourage any of our members, if you have any interest in this, to really look at these numbers and talk to Ms. McKay. She has great things. And I didn't mean to put her in a situation where she just kind of threw down this like horrible like Debbie Downer bomb on the committee about the state of our record keeping here in our state, but I think it is important for everyone to hear. So thank you for that.
Okay, do we have other questions from members? You could raise a hand. I see Assemblywoman Hanson has one, and then we'll go back to Assemblywoman Kasama. Please go ahead, Assemblywoman Hanson.
Hi, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. McKay. I really didn't have questions until just this moment, so sorry to keep you prolonged here. You mentioned that the antiquated system, and I understand the need to modernize and how important that all is. But you mentioned that the person is retiring and it's proprietary. As we move into modernizing and getting other programs or systems, will we avoid that pitfall of avoiding something that's proprietary to an individual? Or is that not possible?
Mindy McKay for the record. Excellent question. This is why lessons learned, you go with a large corporation. You don't go with a smaller mom and pop company. So we chose Unisys. They've been around for decades. They are in national, international. This is their expertise. And because of how large they are and how skilled they are, they're going to be able to carry this through the future for years to come.
Great. Thank you so much.
And we'll go back to Assemblywoman Kasama and then Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Please go ahead.
Chair Yeager, thank you for the indulgence, and Administrator McKay. This is kind of a different question. On the Brady Point of Contact Firearms program, you had a statistics on the background checks in 2019 and 2020. You mentioned in 2020 there was an 80% increase. I'm just curious, do you happen to know, based on those background checks, how many firearm transfers were canceled?
Mindy McKay for the record, just to make sure I'm answering correctly, by canceled, do you mean I went there to buy it and then I decided not to buy it, so I told the gun dealer, never mind?
No, that the background checks were run, and because the background check came up, the firearm transfer could not take place.
Mindy McKay for the record. Okay, so denied. All right, good.
Denied.
Yes, we call that denied. And so if you have a prohibiting criteria in any of your criminal justice information, whether it be a criminal history record, a warrant, parole or probation, if you're an illegal immigrant, there's all kinds of things that we look
Correct.
at. Yes, and so I can get that statistic for you.
I'm just curious how many were actually denied based on us following the process.
I can
Thank
get
you.
that for you. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, would you like to ask your question?
I would just thank you, Chair Yeager, Ms. McKay. I understand what you're going through. In my regular life, we are replacing a 20-year-old system. I would caution any entity that is replacing a system to depend solely on the vendor. Whatever system you are using, you should be able to have people on staff who can do updates, clean up data tables, all of that. Because we found just in the last 5 years, when it comes to agenda processing, many of our large entities in Southern Nevada were using one vendor, and that vendor was bought by someone else, and they all had to scramble to find a new vendor to take over. So Unisys may be big today, but next week they could be eaten by another giant. So I can't for the life of me think of the programming that you use, but those techie people who are up to date, they all know how to write and rewrite and put things in tables. So I think that there has to be some investment as you're going through and pricing all this, investment in your staff, so that you have people who are on staff who can do this work, who can take the what Unisys gives you, be able to go in the back door, clean data, clean tables, so that you're not always going to the vendor because they're going to charge you $300 an hour instead of using someone who you can depend on in-house to do that work as part of their daily tasks. And I think that's going to be important as you come forward each year to have money that you're going to need. If you're always using that vendor, that's going to keep your cost up, and it's going to make it much more difficult to stay relevant and up to date. So just my 2 cents. But I wish you the best. This is not easy. We've been working on our system where I work for the last several years, and it is not easy. It's a very difficult task. Good luck. Good luck.
Mindy McKay for the record. Chair, may I respond?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for that. I might point back to this meeting, so I hope it stays recorded out there somewhere, because we, as I mentioned earlier, we have a program management office and it is staffed. It's staffed by contractors because eventually we won't need them, but it is staffed by full-time equivalent state permanent positions. That is one of the sole purposes, is not only to carry it through implementation, but then to allow a more user-friendly system to where we don't have to depend on IT to make any changes. Well, they're going to still have to make some changes, but we are working this in such a way that my staff are going to be able to do that, not the IT vendor. And it's going to be staff specific to each of those programs as well, not only whereas we will have our remaining PMO staff to continue with this forward, but also the program staff who will be trained and able to run reports and make some changes and do the data cleanup from the back end. And so I greatly appreciate you putting that on the record, because this will help support my ongoing request for funding for that staff to stick around. I don't want to sunset. I'll look at sunsetting maybe some of them. We'll assess the needs when we get closer as to how many staff we need to retain. And if we can let some staff or some positions go, I don't want to lay anyone off, then we will look at that. But I just want to thank you for that.
Okay, so we're going to take one final question from Vice Chair Nguyen, and then we're going to move on to the next presentation. So please go ahead.
You know what? You can go ahead and pass. I'll ask offline. Thank you.
Okay, so we have time for one more. Is there another question out there from anybody? Raise your hand or forever hold your peace. Okay, I don't see. Oh, Assemblyman Wheeler, go ahead. Last question.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, this is for the chairman. I just noticed that you have a beautiful new picture behind you, and I think it would look much better in my office. That's all.
Thank you, Assemblyman Wheeler. I was hard at work. You need to give the people what they want, and the same background seemed a little boring to me. So I'll try to switch it up every now and again, as long as we're in this virtual world. Ms. McKay, I want to thank you for being here. And committee, I hope this wasn't too tedious, but I thought it was important to hear from our central repository, because we've been trying to be more data-driven when it comes to criminal justice reforms. And obviously, if we don't have readily available and accurate data, that's a problem in being data-driven. But I think we're moving in the right direction, certainly, and I'm excited about the modernization efforts. One of our neighboring states, Utah, recently enacted an automatic record sealing for some low-level misdemeanors. Pennsylvania did the same thing, and I would love to be in a position where Nevada could do that at some point. There are some technological limitations and some costs that go with that, so I don't think that's something that's going to happen this session, or maybe not even next session, but hopefully as we move forward with the modernization, we'll be able to consider that type of legislation to streamline the procedures and make it a little bit easier for everybody in the criminal justice system. So Ms. McKay, thank you again. And members, if you have questions offline, please feel free to reach out to Ms. McKay. She's incredibly responsive. Her team is fantastic, and she will get right back to you. And Ms. McKay, I look forward to working with you the rest of the session. And thanks for spending some time on President's Day with us. Okay, so we'll close that agenda item. And now we're going to go to the first item on our agenda, and that is an overview of the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. Members of the committee, members of the public, that presentation likewise is available on Nellis to follow along. Mr. Solferino, I want to thank you for your patience in sitting through the first presentation. Committee, as the agenda states, Mr. Solferino is a lieutenant for the Administrative Bureau of the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. He's no stranger to the legislative process, and I imagine we'll be seeing him quite a bit in the committee. So we'll give you a chance, sir, to go through your presentation, and then I'm sure we'll have some questions for you at the end. So when you're ready, please go ahead.
Excellent. Good morning, Chairman Yeager, Vice Chair Nguyen, members of the committee. Corey Solferino for the record. On behalf of Sheriff Darren Balaam and his executive team, we want to thank you for the opportunity to present before you today. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started with our presentation, and just allow me to share my screen here. Also in the room, Chairman Yeager and members of the committee, I have my Government Affairs Director, Mary Sarah Kenner, who joined our team last session and is continuing on in that role. And I also have Lieutenant Tim Mosley, who's the Detention Watch Commander and Crisis Negotiation Commander for our team, and looking to try to bring him into the government affairs arena. So I wanted to give him an opportunity to see this process come to fruition. This slide, Washoe County, Nevada, for those of you from the South, this is what the North looks like. No pun intended, but I do enjoy seeing the Fremont Cannon blue instead of red, but we love our state collegiate athletics, and we love the interagency rivalry. So some of the showcasing talents that we have up in northern Nevada, from Gerlach to downtown Reno and Midtown to our high desert areas in Lake Tahoe, we do just have a totally beautiful area, about 6,500 square miles in total. We patrol north to the Oregon border, south to the Carson city line, west to California, and east to Wadsworth. We're roughly about a fifth of the size of Las Vegas. Our projections as far as population increases stalled out a little bit in 2020.
My apologies for interrupting. This is broadcast. We are not seeing your slideshow.
Oh, okay. Hold on one second. Let's go back.
That the chair or in the lower right.
I can help if you like. There's the share screen button at the bottom. There you go.
You there?
Yes, if you can just move it into full screen mode, or there you go.
Perfect. Sorry about that. There, that makes a little bit more sense now. So just to go over that, our population increases in northern Nevada stalled out a little bit last year, probably due to the pandemic, but with the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center and a lot of big tech moving to the area, we are seeing exponential growth in northern Nevada. Our 2037 master plan indicates that by 2037, we could see as many as 700,000 in this area. So we are growing at an exponential rate. The Washoe County Sheriff's Office mission and vision statements were dedicated to preserving a safe and secure community with professionalism, respect, integrity, and the highest commitment to equality. And that's something that Sheriff Balaam really brought to the forefront when he came over and took over as sheriff of our agency. And we really drill in the academy and in our in-service training. Our vision statement, we strive to ensure public safety by building trust and creating partnerships within the diverse communities in which we serve. We will promote the dignity of all people, supported by our words and actions through open communication, while fostering an environment of professionalism, integrity, and mutual respect. And that's one of the things Sheriff Balaam really tries to empower his people with, is community outreach and working within our community. We've bolstered up our staffing and our budget for community engagement, and we're just really involved with the community that we serve. We reflect our core values of pride, professionalism, respect, integrity, dedication, and equality. Our motto is commitment to community. It's on all of our patrol cars. And then in 2020, due to COVID, we adapted a new model, which was adaptable, compassionate, and resilient. We continue to provide that same level of service when everyone else was forced to stay home, and ensure that our public safety demands were met. So a little bit about the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. We provide law enforcement services for the unincorporated areas of Washoe County. That includes all the way up to the Gerlach Via area. For those of you that don't know where Gerlach is, it's about 107 miles northeast of Reno. It is the gateway to the Black Rock Desert and the Burning Man annual festivities. We're also responsible for operating the only adult detention facility for pretrial detainees and sentenced misdemeanors in Washoe County. We have an authorized strength of 428 commissioned staff, 301 civilian, and an additional 60 intermittent hourly employees. A majority of those retired officers and civilians from our agency that enjoy working in a part-time capacity and helping our agency. We also have an additional 422 individuals who donate and volunteer their times through search and rescue, through our community emergency response team, and our Citizens Homeland Security Council. Cannot thank and do the job that we do without our volunteers. They provide countless hours of just support to our agency's goals and objectives, and we could not do that mission alone without them. Our annual operating budget is $126 million, which includes about $5 million in restricted funding, such as grants and donations from our Honorary Deputies Association. Sheriff Darren Balaam is the 27th person elected to Sheriff of Washoe County. He came into service at the beginning of last session and has hit the ground running and has not stopped. And for that, we are eternally grateful. He's committed to enhancing our mental health services. For years, you'll hear my counterpart, Chuck Calloway, and I talking about the Clark County Detention Facility and the Washoe County Detention Facility being two of the largest mental health facilities in the state. So we continue to bring awareness and clinicians and mental health professionals into our jail towards those efforts to help recidivism and make sure that our inmates are getting the treatment that they need so they can be productive citizens and have success when they leave the confines of our jail. He's also committed to combating human exploitation and trafficking in our community. I want to showcase one of our regional team units, along with Chief Soto from the Reno Police Department and Chief Crawford from Sparks Police. We created the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Team. They work in conjunction with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and the Sex Offender Notification Unit, specifically targeting those people who are out there promoting human trafficking and sex trafficking to end that goal. We're looking to add additional pieces to that. Currently, it's a 4-detective team, 1 detective sergeant, and then I oversee it as the operational lieutenant. We are going to bring in additional detectives from the Washoe County Sheriff's Office and looking actually to get an additional detective from the University of Nevada, Reno Police Department and the Sparks Police Department to end trafficking in our region. Something that we've been working the entire interim with Assemblywoman Jill Tolles, Kim Yeager from Nevada's Against Trucking, and Rhonda Clifton, former Deputy Attorney General for the state of Nevada. Our organizational chart, the way that it comes through is we have our executive team, the sheriff, Under Sheriff Wayne Yarbrough serves as the CFO of our organization, and then our department is broken up into 3 divisions: administration, detention, and operations. Chief Deputy Greg Herrera chairs our operations division, Chief Deputy Jeff Clark over detention, and Chief Deputy Tim O'Connor over the administration. And then they supervise the captains and respective managers of those given areas. Our current authorized staffing of 358 deputy sheriffs, 45 sergeants, 15 lieutenants, and 5 captains is just a brief overview of the completed staff goals of our agency. A majority of those numbers are, over 51% are dedicated to our detention bureau. So those numbers might look lofty by patrol standards, and they are. It's because over half of our population is working in the detention facility. So we are a little bit below the national average of 2 officers per 1,000 residents. I believe last time I checked, we were about 1.35. So we could definitely use more officers out on the streets. But we're going to talk about something that Sheriff Balaam instituted with our strategic initiatives and stratified policing and using intelligence-led policing to help us in that endeavor. If you look back over the last several years, our authorized commission staffing levels, you'll see that we finally got back to 428. The reason why that number is significant is that was the number that we were last authorized during the recession of 2008. So it's taken us almost 12 years to get back where we were pre-recession. Obviously, you know, everyone's worried about budgetary restraints and what's happening with COVID and what the budget forecasts look like moving forward as the counties and the state move towards a guarded position. So we don't know what that's going to do for our future growth, but with anticipated movement from California, as I spoke of earlier, the Reno Tahoe Industrial Center, we are concerned that it's going to take us several years to maintain our current level of service, if not enhance upon that growing figure. Our agency demographics, we are still a predominantly male-dominated profession at almost 79% of our agency as males, 21% female. Of those, 81% white, 11% identify as Hispanic, 4% Asian, 2.5% African American, 1% American Indian, and 0.5% Pacific Islander. If you guys recognize the little lady to the right-hand side, you might see her during session. She loves coming and visiting with all the legislators during the legislative session, as my daughter Mackenzie. Some of the things that she does to help us go out during recruiting is the Sheriff's Office is no different than any other organization. We go out and we solicit talent. I carry business cards with me. If we receive excellent service, we try to encourage those people to come out and work for us. This is the current demographics of Washoe County, just over 50% male, just under 50% female, about 84% white, 25% which identify as Hispanic, 5.8% Asian, 2.8% African American, and then 3.9% identifies 2 or more races. 2.2% American Indian, and 0.7% Pacific Islanders. So we're always continuing to look towards diversification and adding to the diversity within Washoe County. One of my colleagues that's in the office with me today, Lieutenant Mosley, is chair of our Diversity and Inclusion Committee. If we have some questions after that, I'd love to showcase some of the things that he's doing with his committee and what we're doing to bring diversity to the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. Under the Administrative Bureau, Chief Deputy Tim O'Connor, some of the units under his overall command, our Background Investigation Unit, Civil, our Community Engagement Office, Dispatch, our front desk, the Northern Nevada Law Enforcement Academy is a regional academy that's housed at our Regional Training Center that provides law enforcement academy services to the 3 major law enforcement agencies in the North, Reno, Sparks, Washoe County. We also host others. Occasionally we'll have University of Nevada, Reno cadets, in addition to some tribal Indian colony police academies. They also host the Office of Professional Integrity, which is our Internal Affairs Division, Records, Research and Development, and our Training and Compliance. Some of the administrative highlights that we have, obviously we were huge instruments in support of SB 176 during the 79th session, which mandated body-worn cameras for all uniformed personnel who was in routine contact with the public. As soon as the session was over, myself and Lieutenant Bill Ames were instrumental in getting that rolled out to our entire agency to ensure that all the timelines were met. At the end of last session in 2019, when I was still head of research and development, we integrated Fleet 2 video cameras into all of our MARC patrol units. What that does is Fleet 2 is also an Axon product, so it combined video services that could be merged for cases between body-worn camera and in-car video fields. Prior to that, we were with a different vendor, so you had 2 standalone videos, one that was the body camera, one that was the in-car video, and it made issues for public defenders, for district attorney's office in collecting evidence and using different databases. Now everything's unified into one database for ease of evidence dissemination. In 2021, at the beginning of this year, we integrated body-worn cameras to all of our commissioned detention personnel. You may ask why we decided to do that. Washoe County's unique in the sense that all of our correctional officers who start in detention are all Category 1 law enforcement officers. They go through a full law enforcement officer academy. Sheriff Balaam has the ability in cases of emergency to deploy those personnel out to the field. So for a lot of the special events that we work outside the confines of the jail or contracted services that the state of Nevada oftentimes contracts with us to provide freeway security for different road projects and construction projects that the Nevada Highway Patrol is unable to cancel. So our officers are able to go out and work in that function. Also in an effort to be more transparent with the public that we serve, we do have a robust detention camera system within our facility, but this gives a more up close and personal, intimate review of what's happening versus a 30,000 view approach from the top of the housing unit. So we're excited about that progress. And then in 2023, what we're looking towards is to integrate our interview rooms for detectives along that same Axon platform. So we'll truly have a robust system that captures everything that we're attempting to through one solicited vendor. During 2020, the year of COVID, our CCW processing went up exponentially. Last year, we processed about 1,600 total applications. Currently, we have about 519 pending. We revoked 38 CCWs last year, suspended 1, denied 3, and reinstated 10. Right now, our average daily processing is about 41 days from time of application to time of notification, whether it's denied or approved. Last year, in August of 2019, we were able to go fully operational with our NIBRS program, the National Incident-Based Reporting System. NIBRS will replace UCR and give the Assembly and the Senate, Nevada State Legislature, a lot more information that they need and desire. UCR only tracked Part 1, Part 2 offenses and limited those. NIBRS is definitely more robust and has a wider ability to use data analytics and get the numbers that we need to see what our crime growth rate is in Nevada and across the board. One of the things that we did was our agency partnered with the Reno Police Department, the tribe, and the Sparks Police Department to give the state their certification. So we started that process in August. We had to go through 3 consecutive months of less than 1% errors to get the state certified from the FBI, and we were able to do that. One of the things that we would like is over the course of the last year, we got our baseline for reporting data. So unfortunately, UCR and NIBRS is like comparing apples to oranges. It's just going to show a interesting overall way that we report crime, because now we're reporting and identifying crime that we weren't tracking before at a national level to the feds. So for some instances, it's going to look like maybe an assault that we didn't track before rose 100% last year. We've got our baseline moving forward now. So 2020 was a year that was huge and instrumental in establishing that baseline moving forward. So as we continue to operate and build upon NIBRS, we'll be able to see what our crime trends truly are across the state and in Northern Nevada. Some of our major community outreach events that we've done over the course of the last year are things that our agency just absolutely endures. Our No Shave campaign used to start with just No Shave November. The sheriff, because of community interest and support, has extended it through February of this year. So each month we pick a different nonprofit and or service where we can donate that money for officers and civilians who prefer to relax grooming standards, grow facial hair outside of uniform regulations, or wear jeans to work. And it's just been welcoming across the board for all of the different community endeavors that we've been able to assist over the course of the last 6 years since inception in 2016. Christmas in July, we were able, with the help of our Honorary Deputy Sheriff's Association, to get donated funds to purchase 600 backpacks and school supplies for children in the Washoe County area. Due to COVID, this wasn't a interaction like we would normally like to do it. We did socially distance at our district courthouse parking lot and did drive-through to ensure that everybody was safe and was healthy, and that we were helping out students in need with supplies that they would need for the upcoming school session. Also, Shop with the Sheriff due to COVID was drastically different this year. Our civilian staff and our officers have an amazing time going out and identifying underprivileged children in the area and making sure that they have a wonderful Christmas and have school supplies and clothing that they need for the winter session. This year, what we did is we adopted 105 disadvantaged families, and each deputy sheriff and civilian went out and shopped for those individuals individually, wrapped the gifts, and then we used our regional training center and identified a time and place for all of those people to come up, take a photo with Santa from the vehicle, exchange their gifts, and drive through the parking lot. And it was really a wonderful undertaking, and our community engagement manager, Brooke Howard, just did a phenomenal job putting all the stakeholders together and making that process go off without a hitch. It was really, really well received. Our Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Lieutenant Tim Mosley chairs that committee. It's formed under the direction of Sheriff Darren Balaam. Their focus is to focus on recruitment, hiring, and retention, bringing cultural diversity to the forefront of our agency, being proactive and targeted community outreach efforts, reconsidering our selection criteria that do not correspond to job-related duties. Several years ago, we were wondering why we had so many females that were failing the physical abilities test. We had a archaic hand grip test and a vertical jump of 16 inches that just really wasn't required or shown to enhance any law enforcement functions. So with Post, we worked, and with Human Resources, we worked to re-identify some of those considerations, and we're able to get more females in that process. We also got rid of, on the front end, on our written test, we got rid of a biographical data component at the back end of it I'm not even sure, because I don't work in the human resources world, how that affected our overall score, but we removed that component because there was some inherent biases in that test. So we removed that, and moving forward, I think we've got a better, diverse applicant process as we're going through. So I know we're gonna have some questions on that at the end. That's why I wanted Lieutenant Mosley here today. We're just really proud of those efforts moving forward. Under the Detention Bureau, Chief Deputy Jeff Clark controls the Alternatives to Incarceration programs, our Second Judicial District Court bailiffs, court transportation, our new detention services unit, our detention response team, our inmate management unit, and our programs that we offer to our inmates while housed in our facility. So some of our detention highlights since the last interim is the creation of the Detention Services Unit. That was something that Sheriff Balaam wanted to bring to the forefront. We've talked about a holistic approach and to ensure that some of our inmates are given the proper access to programs and to treatments that they need to help curb the recidivism rate within Washoe County. So DSU is, for lack of a better term, is one-stop shopping. Within the Detention Services Unit in the Washoe County Sheriff's Office, we have state social services, we have discharge planners, we have our local social services, we have a grant-funded advocate through Join Together Northern Nevada. And then we offer all these programs and life skills to help give these inmates and our ability that when they leave, to get rid of that stigma of inmate, that they can go out and they can be productive and they can get the services that they need. We also, during this process, became one of 12 accredited facilities in the entire United States that delivers our medicated assisted treatment program for those inmates that are suffering from substance abuse. Now that is one of two things can happen. Those people are either currently in a program and we can continue those services while they're incarcerated to make sure that there is no letdown. And for those people that are screened and want to be part of the program, we can also start them up while they are in the Washoe County detention facility. Some of our stats, COVID did some interesting things to our stats. You guys will know that as I presented to the committee in years past, we were trending towards an average daily population of about 1123. During COVID, that number went down exponentially. I think the courts and everybody else, including law enforcement, worked in conjunction to ensure only those that needed to go to jail went to jail. So it's resulted in our population dropping almost 200 daily. It's amazing. Our average length of stay, I think, again, due to COVID, went up a couple of days to 17.15. Access to courts and decreased hearings, unfortunately, has some collateral consequences, and our average daily length of stay went up just a little bit. Our bookings are down. Normally, we're hovering around 20,000 annually, so we're down almost 20% over the course of the last year. And our standard of care is about $126 per day. That's just base bone, bare minimum to house, feed, and clothe. With some of the services, training, medication that we are providing, some of those standards of care for inmates are up over $500 per day, just for some financial context. One of the things that we did was we increased our video court capabilities due to COVID. So we now have connections to 2nd Judicial District Court, Incline Village Justice Court, the Reno Justice Court, Sparks Justice Court, Wadsworth Justice Court, the Reno and Sparks Municipal Courts, Federal Court, and Tribal Courts. Sorry, that was a lot of courts. We wanted to be able to enhance those services and help in that right to a speedy trial, right to public hearings, the ability for our inmates to get legal access. And our court transportation team did a phenomenal job. Captain Mark Bello, Chief Clark, Lieutenant Wade Mullen, and Sergeant Joe Durbin just did a phenomenal job in standing up these courtrooms within the detention facility using program space and other areas to enhance these capabilities. We also have a privacy pod within our visiting lobby, which is new. That's for out-of-custody sentencings for those people who may not have access to multimedia in their own residences. And we also have now iPads available for use within the housing units as a trial. We're trying to get them into all housing units. Currently, we have them in 3, but we are working on a program to disseminate them agency-wide. Some of our court transportation statistics, as you can see, we are trending up, and every year except for COVID, we went down exponentially. So we brought that video-based court system to fruition to help with our inmate population and, like I said, access to the courts. Under Operations Bureau, Chief Deputy Greg Herrera heads that. He's in charge of investigations, civil patrol, MATE, Marine 9, motors, EOD, extraditions, our negotiations team, our K-9 team, our Northern Nevada Interdiction Task Force, NRIC, my team, which is the Northern Nevada Regional Intelligence Center. Raven is our regional aviation enforcement, our helicopter, the regional gang unit, search and rescue, SWAT, and our new regional teams initiatives. So just looking at our calls for service, annually we have about 106,000 calls for service between police, EMS, and fire. Of those, about 60,000 are dedicated for law enforcement. Dispatch calls for service are 17,000. Officer initiated are 42,000. Within the regional teams initiative, something that was started in January of last year, I'm happy to report was a combined effort between the Washoe County Sheriff's Office, Reno Police Department, and Sparks Police Department to share services rather than having siloed programs that were doing the same thing and often would cross investigations. We brought everybody into the same room under a unified command and are working towards a regional approach to crime reduction strategies. So now the regional gang unit has representatives of all three agencies, the regional crime suppression unit, the regional narcotics unit, the human exploitation and trafficking unit, our sex offender notification unit, and our internet crimes against children are all under the Northern Nevada Regional Intelligence Center, so we can share information, we can share casework, and we can identify people that are involved in multiple crimes and ensure that officers are equipped with the best information out in the field. We also instituted stratified policing, and I'm going to get to that in just a new slide, to address some of our operational deficiencies and do directed intelligence-led policing patrol. Search and rescue. With COVID last year, we had a lot more people using and recreating outside. That resulted in more requests for service and deployments for our search and rescue division. So you can see the stats there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions regarding those at the end of the presentation. Stratified policing is something Sheriff Balaam is very excited about bringing to the Washoe County Sheriff's Office and ingraining it in our culture. Created by Dr. Roberto and Rachel Santos, it combines several different crime reduction strategies into one usable model. So now we're incorporating place-based policing, person-focused problem solving, and community-based solutions into one methodology. And we're holding people accountable from the line level officer all the way up to the sheriff regarding crime in our area and expedition and service to ensure that cases aren't falling through the cracks, that people and priorities are handled accordingly. So what we're using is real-time crime analytics. We are using our systems, GeoShield and others, to map crime and give our patrol division crime patterns and analysis. So when they have unaccounted for time, when they're not out doing proactive enforcement, when they're not out answering calls for service, these are the areas that they are going to spend a majority of their time talking to neighbors that may be victims of residential burglaries, advising them things that are going on, showing that presence. But from a organizational structure, everyone from the sheriff on down has a piece that they play in that. And then there's weekly accountability meetings that hold everybody accountable to ensure that crime isn't continuing, that problems are being addressed. And if one methodology isn't working, we're using that collaborative groupthink approach to address crime in these different areas. Really exciting stuff that we're being able to do more with less and really direct our resources where they're needed, rather than just placing an officer in every beat and waiting for that call for service. These are what some of our crime analysis bulletins look like when they're pushed out to patrol so they can concentrate their efforts. And again, be happy to answer any questions on those at the conclusion of our presentation. Our Forensic Science Division, the Washoe County Sheriff's Office Forensic Science Division, provides 13 of the 17 counties in Northern Nevada, plus one agency in California, Criminal Justice Forensic Science Services. That equates to be about 80 different user agencies from the state, federal, city, and Indian colony areas. Some of the services that we provide: toxicology, controlled substances, DNA, firearms, crime scene analysis, latent print processing, latent print comparison, breath alcohol. We worked with Assemblyman Roberts last year in making NIBINs mandatory for Northern Nevada, and it has come with huge successes. So we want to thank Assemblyman Roberts for that piece of legislation and the crimes that it's able to connect and processing that we're able to do due to that moving forward. As you can see, our crime lab's done a phenomenal job in getting the turnaround times back down to manageable levels, from everything from biology to CODIS entries, controlled substances, DNA, NIBINs processing. All of our 2020 data is down exponentially from years past, which is decreasing our backlog. We are one team, one agency, one family. We integrate in this place. Sheriff Balaam has a philosophy, work hard, play hard. So we really celebrate each other and some of our accomplishments that we're doing in the community and working with our regional partners to ensure that we have a quality of service second to none. Some of the statistics this year to date is looking like, unfortunately, an increase in officer fatalities and death over a year ago. We're just a few short weeks into the new year and we're already up in total fatalities and firearms related crimes. And then hopefully we can work towards everyone getting vaccinated this year and getting back into the building. One of the things that we really enjoy as a law enforcement coalition is bringing the legislature out to enjoy our Peace Officers Memorial housed just outside the Senate chambers. I've got some dates up there for memorials coming up over the course of our May holiday, and would encourage each and every legislator to attend. We love your guys' support and appreciate the fact that you're out there. Our contact information, in case you have any questions, myself, Lieutenant Tim Mosley, and Mary Sarah Kinner are available for you at any time to answer any questions. We've already collaborated with a lot of you over email. Happy to answer any questions pertaining to crime reduction strategies, law enforcement services in the North, and how we can incorporate those statewide. Chairman Yeager, sir, that's all I have. If you would like to try to keep it to 30 minutes. So I think I did that just within a couple, maybe over, and be happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Solferino. You did a great job getting through that presentation. I think you might win the award for most acronyms in one presentation. I think you actually told us what all of them were. So if our committee secretaries are having a hard time with those, I may have them reach out when they're preparing the minutes just to make sure that we have those accurate. I have a couple of questions so far. I'm sure that we'll have more. So let's start with Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, and then we're going to go to Assemblyman Wheeler, and then Assemblyman O'Neill. So Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Yeager. And thank you so much for the presentation. I can't see you. Sir, I cannot see you right now.
My video's on. I'm sorry.
There must be too many people on here for my little teeny weeny screen. Apologies. But thank you, sir, for your presentation. And I do have three distinct questions. So my first question is two parts. You mentioned the body-worn cameras. I commend you all for transferring to software that will allow you to integrate both your car and body-worn cameras into one system. That was very wise. I'd like to know if those cameras that are worn in detention, do those officers wear those cameras while they are in the detention center? And are they turned on whether they are in the detention center or whether they're on the street as soon as they are deployed? That's my first question.
Yes, ma'am. Excellent question. Corey Solferino for the record. Chairman Yeager, through you to the Assemblywoman. That is something that literally just came up within the last 6 weeks. We went operational downstairs because of reasons that our officers were requested outside of the facility for different engagements. We wanted to give them that operational flexibility. But to your point, they do wear them downstairs. They are on, and there's certain criteria. I'd be happy to share our policy with you offline or at the conclusion of this meeting. I have to run back to my office real quick and get it for instances in which they are required to be activated. We're also working with one of the technology vendors to have our central control or area control personnel who are civilians that work in a bubble and have access to multiple housing units, have the ability to activate those cameras in cases of emergency. If an officer wasn't able to tap their chest and get the body-worn camera activated, we're looking at things. The technology exists to do that in the vehicles. Every time an officer responds code 3 lights and sirens to a call, it automatically sends out a Bluetooth beacon that activates that officer's camera so they don't have to think about it. We're looking at different pieces of technology that we can use to introduce that into our detention setting.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure that that will help to increase confidence in the community so that they could see what things are going on these calls. My next question is, what in the world is a civilian homeland security?
It was something, ma'am, sorry, Corey Solferino again for the record, through you, Chair, to the Assemblywoman. Citizens Homeland Security Council was kind of born out of the fusion centers and the terrorism liaison officers. It's a civilian course that people can go through, similar to a Citizens Academy, but more terrorism, both domestic and international terrorism focused, that allows, it's kind of the See Something, Say Something campaign, was championed by Nevada Threat Analysis Center, and something that we do and work with them annually to add people to that curriculum and get more eyes out on the streets and what to look for so we can be more resilient as a community and better prepared.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. They're not deployed to do any police work. They are just community liaisons. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. Corey Solferino again for the record, Chair, through you to the Assemblywoman. They're there out of a civilian capacity. It just gives them a basic understanding of what to look for. So they're more educated citizens, if you will, but there are no enforcement capabilities. In speaking to the other volunteers that we employ on a routine basis, our search and rescue are highly trained in their different endeavors, whether it's the Aero Squadron or the specialized units as far as hasty and diving recovery. They're obviously their own skill sets. We do have 2 full-time search and rescue personnel assigned from the Sheriff's Office that are commissioned. Our sergeant is the commander over the overall team. And then our deputy serves as his deputy director of search and rescue operations, coordinating responses with all the civilians. On the Citizens Emergency Response Team, we utilize them mostly for disasters, floods, fires. We'll give them checkpoints and access to information so we can be more prepared, resilient for community events, special events. And then hopefully, like I said earlier, as people get vaccinated, we use them as information centers at our Great Reno Balloon races at Rancho San Rafael or the Reno Tahoe air races. They're just educated volunteers out there as ambassadors to the Sheriff's Office.
Thank you so much for that. Final question from Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, Assembly District 6. I heard that you was very impressed that you looked at some of your testing for inherent bias. I heard you speak to the physical test for women and other things like that. Have you looked at your psych test to see whether or not there is any inherent bias in that test or any of your other tests for racial or cultural inherent bias?
Corey Solferino for the record, Chair, through you to the Assemblywoman. Ma'am, I wish I could answer that question. We can chat offline. Julie Paholke is our human resources consultant. Her office is actually housed out of the Sheriff's Office, but she does work for Washoe County. I'd be happy to find out what kinds of things that we are doing. Many years ago, I've been in the profession almost 22 years now. In year 4, I was a background investigator, and I haven't really kept up on the different types of psychological profiles that we're administering to date. So I would have to check with our backgrounds division and with human resources, but I'd happy to get that information to you.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your responses. And I would also appreciate if you all would begin to look into that issue. We have quite a few people in our community who have tried to become police officers. And in every instance where we've had someone that I know who has not been able to make it, it has always been the psychological assessment. And I find that very curious. And I can think of at least 5 instances of folks I know who've done everything else, physical, everything, but it's that psych test. And I would be interested to find out if there could be some bias there. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And Mr. Solferino, feel free to go directly to the members. You don't have to go through the chair unless you prefer to do that, but totally your choice in this committee. Let's go next to Assemblyman Wheeler, who I believe has a couple of questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Lieutenant, You were talking about your staffing levels with I believe it was authorization of 428 sworn officers. I'm wondering how many you have on duty now and how the COVID has hit you as far as reducing staffing, et cetera.
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Wheeler. Corey Solferino for the record. COVID's, every day we're trying to adapt with COVID. Obviously our line personnel, our operations folks that are out on the street answering calls for service and doing proactive enforcement, and our detention staff providing safety and security to our institution are here daily and didn't stop. We practiced, social distancing standards that we could. Our inmate staff and our administrative staff have been awesome as far as ensuring that we had the proper cleaning supplies that we needed to help mitigate some of those efforts. They have reported day in and day out since the beginning of COVID without question. What we try to do with some of our support services, not understanding how COVID would impact our line officers, was use them in reserves. So we fully anticipated our line staff to get infected and have days off from work, by which we would have to backfill detectives and our administrative staff back into line functions, as that was our primary mission, was the safety and security of our citizens. Luckily, that didn't happen. We did have people that did become infected with COVID and have recovered. Luckily, we haven't had any fatalities, either inmate staff or our commissioned staff or civilian staff. Everyone that has been infected with the disease was able to recover from it. But we did have those plans in place where we went down to our administrative support people, detectives working from home, trying to keep safe, trying to keep healthy, so that we could use them on the back end. We've now slowly reintegrated everybody back to a full-time working capacity out of the sheriff's office. We've increased distances in between desks. We've used shields to protect each other from one another, for lack of a better term. And we've just continued to march forward, Assemblyman. So we've been very, very successful, very, very fortunate to not have any huge outbreaks with either the employees or the inmate population. And for that matter, the way the statewide mandate came down and tiering law enforcement and first responders in that first majority of our officers, myself included, have already been vaccinated, have our second vaccination, and we're hoping to get back to brighter days.
Well, thank you. Lieutenant, my original question was, what is your staffing level now, though, with your 428 authorized?
I'm sorry, we're still at 428, sir. Again, sorry, Corey Solferino for the record. We're at 428. I believe we have 21 in the academy currently. The Washoe County Human Resources allows us to overhire by 15 just to plan for attrition. So those 15 that are currently in the academy, or 21 that are in the academy, by the time they come online, that's 6-7 months from now. Once they're out of the academy, they're done with their field training officer program, and they're actually counting as a position in a spot. We're going to have retirements, movement, transfers from there. So right now we are close to fully staffed, sir.
Oh, that's great. Because I know that Metro, when they were on, said that they were very understaffed. So this hasn't really hurt your recruiting efforts much?
Corey Solferino for the record, Chair, through you to the Assemblyman. It is, recruiting is always difficult, and we are always trying to figure out how to rebrand. Just case in point, sir, in 2004 to 2006, when I was in backgrounds, we would have openings and we'd have anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 candidates apply specifically just to the Washoe County Sheriff's Office for employment consideration. Now we're lucky to garner 300. So those numbers have gone down exponentially over the years. We're trying to recruit in different venues, different areas, not just the criminal justice field, through universities, through the military, through community colleges. And just like we said, every single officer and employee of the Sheriff's Office is an ambassador for this agency. So if we see good service, we recruit it. Several years ago, I ended up tearing my rotator cuff while I was in K-9 going after a suspect. And while I was going through my rehab, one of the physical therapists there, she and I started talking over the course of my recovery, and she's now a deputy employed, has been here for 4 years now. So it's just things like that and getting out of our boxes to see what kind of different people we can recruit and become an attractive profession again. It's just, it's difficult. Not everybody wants to be a law enforcement officer, unfortunately, at this current point in time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblyman Wheeler. We'll go next to Assemblyman O'Neill and then Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. Lieutenant Sofrino, I was wondering if you could go into a little more detail about your discharge planning there at the jail. And the reason why I asked that is a constituent contacted me concerning a severely mentally ill woman who was discharged from the jail. She was given a bus ticket and that was it. She went missing for 2 days. Finally, Reno PD found her and returned her got her into a women's shelter, but there had been no contact with the mental health agencies or her social worker prior to discharge. And I understand mistakes happen, but I would just wonder if you could go into that a little more detail and ensure me that it wouldn't occur again, please.
Yes, sir. Corey Solferino for the record, Chair, through you to the Assemblyman. I apologize, sir. I'm not familiar with that case. My understanding as people are booked into our facility, they are screened for mental health impairment through our clinicians. Those people who meet that certain classification, if they're not able to be routed out of the facility and are going to be staying for extended amounts of time, are routed to the appropriate units that have those services 24/7. When people are planned to be discharged or released, that goes through our detention services unit. I unfortunately don't have a majority of that information. That's run by Sergeant Randy Vaughters and Captain Mark Bello, but I'd be happy to look into that matter specifically for you, sir, and find out the facts and circumstances to ensure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if you could just go through the details or get to the committee what the procedure is on. You had mentioned that you have a discharge planning procedure. I'd be curious what that is then. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman O'Neill. We'll go next to Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Chair, and good to see you, Lieutenant Solferino, Lieutenant Mosley, Ms. Skinner, and appreciate the presentation. I have a question and then perhaps a suggestion. Our son was at the University of Nevada, Reno about 6 years ago, and I was surprised to see that metropolitan cities in Southern California were coming to Nevada to recruit young people to consider law enforcement. And so, of course, my question's around recruitment. And I was really surprised to learn that as the presentation unfolded, that one of the stumbling blocks when somebody is going through the recruitment process or applying is that their statistic was 85% of the applicants couldn't pass the background check. And I was stunned by that. And I don't know if that's the kind of numbers that we see, which I would like you maybe to address. But before that, my thought process is if we're talking about recruitment or explorers or getting into the schools, getting into, trying to get young people early on. I know, the DARE program was successful in the schools, trying to get into to get in contact with young people, male, female, all races at an early age, so that all kids, they make some stupid decisions in life, some bad choices, especially in their teen years. Perhaps if they understood that they can have great opportunities, great paying jobs, good benefits, and they've got to avoid some of these pitfalls that come up against our youth. So I'm just curious if there's those kinds of efforts going on when we talk about recruitment, where we're getting ahead of the game with the young people to try to help them understand how sometimes bad choices can prevent them or at least stall them getting, an opportunity to have certain careers.
Well, thank you for the question, ma'am. Corey Solferino for the record, Chair, through you to the Assemblywoman. Excellent points. And unfortunately, due to COVID, a lot of those efforts have been stifled. We were doing a aggressive reading campaign in our elementary schools and trying to establish those bonds. We have deputies that are assigned as ambassadors to different area elementary schools to volunteer, whether it's reading, whether it's just being on campus. And because of COVID, those efforts have been pulled away for the foreseeable future until we're able to get everybody back into the classroom. Our recruiting budget, I'm not trying to make excuses from the human resources side of the house, is very minimal at best as far as being able to travel and try to get some of that California talent that can come over to Nevada like they have in the industry side. We'd like to do it on the services side as well. When I was back there, we usually hit the Bay Area circuit in Southern California. It was about all the time that we had and about all the finances that we had to make an effort. So that's why I'm happy to have Lieutenant Tim Mosley in here, and hopefully can get him to talk, and you guys can see him a little bit more as my heir apparent when my legislative duties are done. I'm trying to get him motivated to come in here and look at some of those efforts. But as chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, things that we just haven't done in the past that we're trying to get towards and moving forward, I think we can get there. Our return on investment is going to be about 10 years down the road if we're targeting the right population and we're developing those mentorships and those partnerships with our kids in our school system. I think we'll get there, but the benefit's going to be several years away from now. Tim, would you like to add anything?
Well, thank you for that. I'm so glad to hear that. Of course, you were far smarter than me with this idea, and you've been doing it. So I guess the fruits will bear out eventually. And Lieutenant Mosley, we look forward to working with you, and big shoes to fill, but I'm sure that you're up for it, and look forward to getting to converse with you more during this session. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Assemblywoman Hanson. Other questions from committee members? I think I have you all on my screen. Just give me a show of hand up if you have a question for our presenters. Okay, I don't see additional questions. Lieutenant, I want to thank you and the folks who were with you here today. They didn't speak today, but I'm sure we're going to have hearings in the future where they will. So I appreciate you bringing them with you so we can put a face to a name. And thank you for spending a little bit of your President's Day Monday with us. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you in the future in the Assembly Judiciary Committee.
Our pleasure, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and close the presentation. And at this time, we're going to move on to the public comment portion of our meeting. As a reminder, we'll reserve up to 30 minutes for public comment at the end of the meeting. Callers on the public comment line will have 2 minutes to provide public comment. I do believe we have at least a couple of folks who are interested in giving public comment today. So BPS, when you are ready, let's go to the public comment line. And when the first caller is ready, please ask them to proceed.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. And we will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 037. Caller with the last 3 digits of 037, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Tanya Brown, TONJABROWN. Tanya Brown, Advocates for the Inmates. I'd like to make a couple of comments on both of the presentations. Starting with sealing of the records. I may have a suggestion. It's just a suggestion. Most people just do not have the financial means to get their records completely sealed in the state and federal courts. So, I'm just saying that, perhaps a person, and the DMV can set it up, a person can go down to the Department of Motor Vehicles, Public Safety, and obtain a card similar to a driver's license, in which they can present it to a possible future employer. The employer would look at the card, and on the card there would be an identification number. They could log in to the website, the DMV website, punch in the identification number. It would then pop up the individual's picture, and then they would be prompted to punch in the code that would also be on the card. And once they get that far, the state, or what it would read would be something like, according to the Department of Public Safety, such and such person there's no record of any criminal activity, and then they could use that to help them get employment until maybe one day they can afford to get it over to the federal side to get their records sealed. Also, I'd like to talk about the Washoe County's Sheriff's presentation. We have had concerns about the inmates not having access to masks. And Ms. Noble last week talked about how some of these inmates are awaiting trial by months and even over a year because of COVID. And so I'd like to see these inmates, what's going on with those who are awaiting trial. I mean, they need to be protected, because if they cannot have their day in court, and if they should pass away because of COVID or other health issues, there is no remedy for them to exonerate their names. So I'd like to know what the sheriff's office is doing to protect those who are awaiting trial for. So I'd like to know that as well. And also, something was brought up, and I don't know if you are aware of this
Ms. Brown,
or not, but there.
Miss Brown, could you please wrap up when you get a chance?
Yes. Oh, I was just about finished. I don't know if you are aware of this, but there are some school districts throughout the country who are implementing in their criteria a book entitled One Stupid Night. It's geared to young males ages 16 to 25, and it's it is a book on things and actual cases in which young males have committed crimes and how it has affected their life and the consequences of what doing something stupid, that one stupid night, can affect their college, job requirements, their future, in a lot of things. And I think that if the state of Nevada implemented a book such as that, I think you would probably get more people joining law enforcement and other types of jobs because of something they had done, and would maybe prevent them in the future from not wanting to do that. So it's just a thought. It's called One Stupid Night by Mary Elizabeth Morgan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brown. Appreciate your public comment. BPS, do we have anybody else on the public comment line?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Caller with the last three digits of 556. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Anne-Marie Grant, ANNEMARIEGRANT. My brother Thomas Purdy was 38 years old when he was hogtied by Reno police and then asphyxiated to death by 4 deputies at the Washoe County Jail. One of them, of which was Paul Hubble, who went on to asphyxiate Justin Thompson less than a year after my brother was asphyxiated by deputies. I'd like to mention that Sergeant Solferino also was involved in the first asphyxiation death of Nico Smith at the jail. He was the first man asphyxiated at Washoe County. This past summer, my brother, my 12-year-old nephew, and my 19-year-old son were up at the sheriff's office. We flew in from Boston because my brother was a guest in your Washoe County when he was murdered by police. And we were holding a banner, and we were surrounded by 6 of Washoe County Sheriff's deputies trying to intimidate us to move to the so-called free speech area. I'd like to mention that one of the deputies, his last name was Wood. First name isn't Jason, it's the other one. He kept his hand on his gun the entire time, and that's just unbelievable. And when they first came out, none of them had on their body cams. They came out 3 times that day, and it was just literally the 4 of us standing there peacefully. And it upset me when one came out and he said, "I'm sorry, I don't know who Thomas Purdy is." Well, my feeling is Sheriff Balaam isn't doing his due diligence. And if he's not talking about the shortcomings that happened at Washoe County Jail and they're just sweeping them under the rug, everybody who works at that jail should know Thomas Purdy, Nico Smith, and Justin Thompson's name. It should be incorporated into their training. They asphyxiated 3 men to death. My brother was hogtied for 40 minutes, which I'm going to submit to the committee I'll send it to your exhibit email, some links if anybody's interested in seeing. My brother was, they talked about their camera system. They got a handheld camera. I thought my brother was acting so strange. They got a handheld camera and video recorded him, but not an ambulance. There's no investigations into the deaths. None of the officers were ever re-spoken to. None of them were made any new statements to Reno PD besides their initial reports they wrote up for the jail. Families are victimized over and over by Washoe County when their loved one is killed by them. There is still a family that is waiting a year later for the body cam footage. Abel Lopez. Washoe County Sheriffs took the lead and they have yet to release that video. So Balaam should, if he talks about transparency. And the last thing I want to mention is they talked about transparency, but I saw it on the Washoe County Commissioner's agenda and alerted the public and the media that Washoe County Sheriff's Office is trying to increase their body cam footage an exorbitant fee. And luckily the community members came together and we got that stopped. And that's all I have because I know my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Appreciate your public comment. EPS, is there anybody else on the line?
Chair, the public line is open and working. There are no further callers at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. Appreciate it. Before we talk about the rest of the week, anything else from our committee members this morning? Hey, I don't see anything else. Thank you again for your attention this morning. Just a couple of announcements that are a little different than what I told you on Friday. We are going to have meetings the rest of the week. However, on Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be starting at 9 o'clock rather than 8 o'clock. Tomorrow is going to be an 8 o'clock start, as is Friday. I will try to remember to remind you when we change the start times, but it's always a good idea the night before to check the agenda just to be sure. If you get here early, I'm sure you have plenty of work to do, but I don't know that we're going to be consistent in the start time. It'll probably be either 8 or 9, just depending on what's on the agenda. So that is it. Tomorrow we have 2 bills brought forward by the Attorney General's office. And again, we'll have an 8 o'clock start tomorrow morning. So with all that being said, thank you, committee, for a great meeting this morning. And I'll see you all tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned.